Two cities, born from tides and trade winds, stand like twin reflections upon the Asian Sea, both glittering, both restless, both reaching for the sky. One thrives on precision, the other on pulse. Between them hums a quiet competition, polished in courtesy but sharpened in ambition. They share the same air of success, the same hunger for global acclaim, yet behind the handshakes lies an echo of envy. Soft, unspoken, inevitable. Singapore watches Hong Kong not with hatred, but with haunting curiosity, for in Hong Kong's chaos, it glimpses a freedom it tamed, and in its own order, a power Hong Kong lost. In the heart of Asia, two cities rise like reflections caught in the same dawn. Singapore, meticulous and methodical, and Hong Kong, impulsive and instinctive. They are bound not only by geography, but by shared ancestry. Both born under the British Crown, molded by colonial order, and baptized in saltwater trade. From the scent of harbor winds to the rhythm of glass towers, they share a pulse that beats to ambition's drum. Each stands as a symbol of what the East could become when discipline meets desire, when strategy meets spontaneity. Singapore, a garden of precision, flourishes on foresight. Hong Kong, a storm of energy, thrives on instinct. And in their differences, they recognize something hauntingly familiar, a reflection of themselves. Both cities are, in truth, mirror images forged by the same story told in two dialects. In the disciplined calm of Singapore, Hong Kong glimpses the order it never tamed. In Hong Kong's restless energy, Singapore witnesses the freedom it quietly envies. Each watches the other's ascent with admiration edged in unease, for every success in one feels like a challenge to the other's identity. Their rivalry is not born of contempt, but of comparison, not of hostility, but of history. When Hong Kong's neon lights blaze into the night, Singapore's skyline listens in silence, learning, measuring, quietly plotting its next move. They are not enemies, they are twins separated by temperament, forever testing the boundaries of what it means to survive greatness. Theirs is a dance between structure and spark, between control and chaos. Hong Kong hums with improvisation, a city always in motion, bold enough to risk the fall for the thrill of the flight. Singapore, ever deliberate, builds its future one measured line at a time, turning calculation into art. Together, they embody the dual soul of modern Asia, order and audacity, intellect and instinct. The rivalry that threads between them is not a war, but a whisper. Be better, climb higher, dream louder. And so, in the mirrored gaze of progress, Singapore and Hong Kong continue to evolve, not as opponents, but as reflections in the same shimmering skyline. The story of this rivalry began not in boardrooms or treaties, but in the quiet hum of ambition rising from two island hearts. In the 1960s, as the world reshaped itself after war and empire, Hong Kong and Singapore stood on the edge of reinvention. One was a harbor city caught between communism and capitalism, learning to thrive on uncertainty. The other, a young nation newly independent, determined to build order from chaos. Hong Kong became the East's shimmering gateway, its skyline a symphony of neon and noise, its streets alive with film stars, financiers, and dreamers. Singapore, by contrast, moved like a disciplined orchestra, every note arranged by vision and precision. Where Hong Kong danced to jazz, Singapore marched to Mozart. Different rhythms, same melody of ascent. By the 1980s, Hong Kong had become the cinematic capital of Asia, the Hollywood of the East, where stories of gangsters, heroes, and rebels mirrored the pulse of its restless people. Its financial market surged, a playground for risk and reward, its identity woven from grit and glamour. Singapore watched, admiring, analyzing, learning. It saw what freedom could create, but also what it could destroy. While Hong Kong charmed the world with chaos, Singapore constructed its own miracle brick by brick, a haven of efficiency, safety, and foresight. Lee Kuan Yew's Singapore built skyscrapers not for spectacle, but for strategy. The admiration was real, but so was the tension. Two cities racing not just for prosperity, but for the narrative of who best embodied Asia's promise. By the 1990s, their rivalry had matured into something more profound, an unspoken dialogue of progress and pride. Singapore, once the quiet observer, began to outpace its muse. While Hong Kong basked in its cinematic glow, Singapore became the world's trusted hub, clean, connected, and consistent. Yet behind its calm composure, Singapore's gaze often drifted northward, toward that loud, luminous rival that once ruled the skyline. For decades, it had watched Hong Kong glow in the global imagination, freer, louder, faster. But deep within that admiration lay the seed of resolve, to one day not only catch the light, but to surpass it. Every rivalry hides a philosophy, and between Singapore and Hong Kong, that divide runs like a heartbeat beneath glass towers and skyline lights. Singapore is a city of blueprints, precision written into its DNA. It believes in systems, in discipline, in the steady hand of governance shaping destiny. Rules are not chains here, they are scaffolds for success. Streets gleam, trains run on time, and ambition moves with deliberate grace. In Singapore, progress is predictable, planned, rehearsed, perfected. It is the poetry of control, the art of making the improbable look effortless. But perfection, as beautiful as it is, can sometimes feel like silence, a hum too consistent to stir the soul. Hong Kong, on the other hand, thrives on improvisation. It is a city that sprints through storms and turns uncertainty into energy. Deals are made over dim sum, fortunes rise and fall between sunrise and sunset, and its skyline seems to breathe with the pulse of its people. Freedom there is not just political. It's spiritual, a current of defiance that shapes its art, its business, its identity. Where Singapore polishes, Hong Kong provokes. One draws its beauty from control, the other from chaos. It is this chaos that gives Hong Kong its character, alive, unpredictable, and human. To walk through its streets is to feel time race beside you, daring you to catch up. Yet beneath Singapore's calm confidence, there lingers a quiet envy, not of Hong Kong's wealth, but of its wildness. For in that chaos lies something Singapore's order can never fully replicate. Emotional pulse, the ability to stumble, to feel, to fail loudly and recover stronger. In Singapore, life works. In Hong Kong, life happens. One builds the dream, the other lives it, messily, passionately, beautifully. And somewhere between those two truths, the rivalry deepens, not in hostility, but in yearning. Singapore watches Hong Kong's chaos like an orchestra listening to jazz, admiring its rhythm even as it clings to its sheet music. By the dawn of the new millennium, two cities stood glittering beneath the same Asian sky, both symbols of ambition, both masterpieces of resilience. Singapore and Hong Kong had ascended from colonial outposts to global titans, their skylines now signatures of modern Asia. Money moved through their veins like electricity, fast, constant, alive. The world looked east, and there they were, twin stars of finance, dazzling in different ways. Yet even in their shared success, something began to divide them, not in power, but in perception. The applause, though loud for both, carried different tones. Hong Kong became the world's muse, cinematic, textured, full of contradiction and soul. Its story was one of tension and triumph, of neon nights and rain-soaked dreams, immortalized in film, fashion, and memory. It wasn't just a financial hub. It was a feeling. The world loved Hong Kong for its grit, for its imperfections that made it real. Meanwhile, Singapore shone with quiet precision. It built order into prosperity, safety into identity, and yet, its perfection was often mistaken for sterility. Where Hong Kong danced in chaos, Singapore marched in symmetry. One inspired art, the other inspired efficiency. And though both led Asia's rise, the world's heart leaned subtly toward the city that felt alive enough to bleed. In that delicate imbalance, envy took on a softer hue, not resentment, but reflection. Singapore was the model student who built everything right, yet still wondered why the audience cheered louder for the rebel next door. It earned the world's respect, but Hong Kong captured its imagination. And so, the rivalry deepened, not for dominance, but for meaning. For in the theater of global attention, admiration is not always applause. Sometimes, it's emotion. The world loved Hong Kong's story, and Singapore quietly asked why its perfection still felt unseen. Beneath the success, both cities longed for what the other already possessed, one envying chaos, the other craving calm, mirrors glimmering in the global light, reflecting everything except themselves. The tide never announces its coming. It just shifts, silently, until the familiar shore is redrawn. Between 2019 and 2020, that tide swept across Asia. Hong Kong, once the restless heart of global finance and freedom, trembled under the weight of protests and politics. Streets that once shimmered with commerce now echoed with the sound of conviction and tear gas. The city that had danced with chaos suddenly found itself caged by it. And as its skyline dimmed behind smoke and silence, the world turned its gaze, not away, but elsewhere, toward Singapore, steady and still beneath the same storm. Singapore did not celebrate. It observed. As uncertainty rippled through markets and minds, its order became refuge. Businesses crossed oceans, investors relocated, and talent sought shelter in its calm embrace. The island that had long envied Hong Kong's fire became the harbor for those escaping it. Yet amid this quiet influx, victory felt hollow. Singapore hadn't overtaken Hong Kong through brilliance or audacity. It had simply endured. The triumph was not of competition, but of circumstance. The baton of Asia's financial leadership passed hands not in a race, but in retreat. And somewhere beneath the hum of progress, a loneliness settled in. For what is rivalry without its reflection? Singapore had risen, yes, but into silence. The mirror city it once measured itself against now stood dimmed, and the applause that followed its ascendance sounded strangely faint. In gaining the world's confidence, it lost its counterpoint, the one city that made its identity feel complete. Beneath its glass towers and calm streets, Singapore understood the bittersweet truth. It had outlasted Hong Kong, but in doing so, it lost the one that made the journey meaningful. Because every rivalry is a relationship, and every triumph without a rival is a quiet kind of grief. Every polished city hides a pulse it cannot control. Beneath Singapore's spotless order and orchestrated calm, there lingers a quiet ache, an unspoken envy not of wealth or power, but of pulse and imperfection. For decades, it built a world where everything worked. Trains on time, laws obeyed, futures planned with precision. Yet, as its skyline reached perfection, something human seemed to slip through the cracks. Hong Kong, with its restless streets, its flickering neon lights, its chaos that felt alive, carried a rhythm that Singapore could never quite script. It was messy, unpredictable, cinematic, and in that rawness, there was soul. Singapore admired Hong Kong's audacity, how it danced with risk, how it breathed through turbulence without losing itself. Where Singapore calculated, Hong Kong improvised. Where one rehearsed, the other lived. It wasn't about efficiency, it was about essence. In the back alleys of Mong Kok, in the crowded trams, in the humid hum of late-night markets, life wasn't perfect, but it was felt. Singapore's envy wasn't bitter, it was wistful. Beneath every smile at its own success lay a longing to feel something unscripted, a rebellion that didn't need permission, a freedom that wasn't measured by GDP. Because envy isn't always about lacking, sometimes it's about yearning for what one never dared to be. Singapore built a masterpiece, polished, precise, admired by the world. But Hong Kong lived a story, flawed, unpredictable, unforgettable. One city engineered perfection, the other embraced emotion. And deep down, beneath the glittering glass and green order, Singapore knows beauty without chaos is discipline, but chaos with heart is art. It's why Hong Kong's hum lingers even now, in memory, in admiration, in envy shaped like love. In the end, every rivalry is a mirror, not a battle. Between Singapore and Hong Kong, the reflection has always been intimate, not adversarial. Two cities born of the same colonial blueprint, shaped by trade winds, ambition, and survival, each asking the same unrelenting question: how do you thrive without losing yourself? For decades, they ran parallel like twin constellations in Asia's skyline, one precise, one passionate, one careful, one chaotic. Yet as time passed, the heat of competition softened into something gentler. Recognition. Singapore sees in Hong Kong not a rival, but a version of itself unrestrained. Hong Kong sees in Singapore the order it once wished it had. And in that mutual gaze, there is respect, forged through contrast, sustained by understanding. When Hong Kong faltered under protest and politics, Singapore did not gloat, it absorbed. It became the refuge, the inheritor of displaced dreams and global trust. But even in that rise, there was no triumphal song, only silence. The silence of a city realizing that victory without empathy feels hollow. For beneath the rivalry lies kinship, born of shared struggle and shared brilliance. Both cities stood as gateways, not just to Asia, but to possibility itself. One taught the world resilience through freedom, the other taught it discipline through design. Together they shaped the vocabulary of modern Asia, finance and faith, progress and pride. The world needed both, Hong Kong's spirit and Singapore's stability, chaos and calm, thunder and thought. Now, as their skylines shimmer beneath the same fading sun, the rivalry fades into reflection. The envy, the comparisons, the quiet measuring of worth, all dissolve into a deeper truth. They were never competing for greatness, but for meaning. Hong Kong, even in its struggle, remains poetry in motion. Singapore, in its precision, remains the punctuation that holds it steady. Perhaps envy was never about competition at all, but connection. Two cities that taught each other what it means to endure. Two hearts that beat differently, yet keep time with the same rhythm of becoming. In their reflection, Asia sees not division, but duality, proof that there's more than one way to shine. In the grand story of Asia's ascent, Singapore and Hong Kong stand not as competitors, but as companions in evolution. Two visions of the same dream, sculpted by history, tempered by time. One chased precision, the other passion. One built systems, the other stories. And yet, both revealed that progress wears many faces. Some calm, some chaotic, but all human at their core. Their rivalry was never truly about supremacy. It was about identity. It was about the longing to be seen, the ache to matter, the desire to define what modern Asia could be. Beneath skyscrapers and success metrics lies a shared heartbeat, a rhythm that reminds us that no matter how far we run, we are still reflections of one another. And so, as the lights fade over Victoria Harbor and Marina Bay, Asia, I Within thanks you for watching, for feeling, for reflecting, for listening. If this story stirred something within you, remember to like, share, and subscribe, not just for more stories, but for more mirrors into the soul of our world. Because here, at AsiaEyeWithin, we don't just tell stories, we uncover the truth that hums beneath them.